Hey guys, tonight we step into the dim, smoky interior of a medieval barbershop, though calling it just a barbershop might be underselling it a bit. There's no peppermint shampoo, no spa music, and certainly no sterile white aprons. Instead, you're hit by the sharp tang of iron and clove oil, the scent of warmed beeswax, and something vaguely singed. A wooden chair with leather straps sits center stage. It's not ominous at all, really. Just practical. You're here for a trim. Maybe a shave. Maybe an impromptu tooth extraction. Or a little light surgery while you're at it. Behind you, your barber casually sharpens his blade. His tools jangle on his belt like keys on a janitor's ring. Except instead of unlocking doors, they unlock veins, abscesses, and occasionally souls. He's smiling. You're pretending not to be nervous. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're drifting off from Nairobi or Nebraska, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I'd love to see where we all gather for sleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit down, the chair creaks beneath you. It's not padded, but somehow still warm either from the hearth or the last customer. Across the wooden counter are neatly laid blades, clamps, needles, little pouches of powdered herbs, a horn comb, and oddly an ivory tooth with a gold filling. You decide not to ask. The barber greets you like an old friend, and that's not unusual. In medieval Europe, your barber was more than a guy with scissors. He was, depending on the day, and your luck, your doctor, dentist, or minor surgical consultant. He might also deliver your neighbor's baby or lance her husband's boil, depending on how full the day's schedule was. Let's be clear, you live in a time when the concept of germ theory is still centuries away. Hand washing is an emerging luxury, and anesthesia consists of being really drunk. Medicine is more art than science, more superstition than biology. But your barber, he's got tools, he's got confidence, he's got a striped pole out front. He's as close to healthcare as most people ever get. This world isn't completely chaotic, though. Barbers don't just operate freelance in the town square with a hacksaw. They often belong to guilds, tight-knit organizations that set professional standards, regulate training, and occasionally throw mildly aggressive parties. Within these guilds, barber-surgeons train apprentices, charge set fees, and argue over who gets to handle the juiciest abscess in town. Still, there's a lot of overlap. Some barbers do mostly shaving and beard trimming. Others pivot into surgery because, well, someone has to remove the tarot head. And others still bounce between haircuts and bloodletting like it's a 2-for-1 special. Your guy seems like one of the hybrids. He sharpens his knife while humming a hymn you don't recognize. You notice the tip of his thumb is missing. You choose not to ask about that either. Historians still argue whether the barber-surgeon emerged out of necessity or ambition. Was it a practical evolution in villages where access to educated physicians was non-existent? Or was it a strategic grab for prestige by the working class? Either way, these men held a fascinating place in society. They weren't quite elite like university-trained doctors, but they weren't just street peddlers either. They occupied a liminal space, highly skilled, reasonably trusted, but always a little suspect. Take a moment now to absorb your surroundings. The candlelight flickers in brass holders. A wooden basin of water warms near the fire. There's a pig bladder hanging by the window it'll be reused, probably as a sterile container. The walls are lined with parchment illustrations showing where to bleed patients to rebalance their humors. Those for elemental fluids that medieval people believed governed everything from mood to illness. You're feeling a little too much black bile lately. The barber nods solemnly and reaches for a blade. You shiver. Is it from the draft or the anticipation? And yet, here's the strange part. People trusted these barbers, more than physicians sometimes. Especially during pandemics or wars, when the robed academics fled and the barbers remained, blade in hand. There's a kind of gritty intimacy to that. They knew your face, they saw your wounds, they stitched them with gut thread, cleaned them with vinegar, and maybe even held your hand during the worst of it. Tonight, we'll walk with them, watch their hands move, hear their jokes often dark, sometimes gentle as they cut away what hurts and, with luck, leave something healed behind. So lean back, you've made it to the chair, and the story is just beginning. The razor glints in the firelight. It's curved, wicked-looking, and recently honed. You stare at it while pretending to examine the wooden ceiling beams. You're a barber, ever the multitasker, is halfway through preparing a bowl of lather while recounting, in rather cheerful tones, how he once drained a swelling the size of a hen's egg from a blacksmith's thigh. He calls it a clean job, which, you note, is a relative term in a place with sawdust floors and exactly zero antiseptic. You're here for a shave, sure, but medieval barbers are rarely just barbers. Their services often include bloodletting, tooth extraction, minor surgeries, setting bones, cauterization, and even treating infections, though treating may be too optimistic a word. You start to wonder if that razor is for your beard or for your forearm vein. Because here's the deal. Back in the Middle Ages, people believed disease wasn't caused by germs, but by imbalances in the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much of any one, and you'd fall ill. The solution: restore balance, and one of the fastest ways to rebalance someone was to simply let out some of that pesky blood. Enter the barber. You see, trained physicians were rare, expensive, and often unwilling to deal with the messier procedures. Bleeding a patient was beneath them, quite literally. It was manual labor, physical and hands-on. But your local barber, he already worked with blades. He already understood skin and muscle. So while the doctor stood back and quoted Galen in Latin, the barber rolled up his sleeves and opened a vein. Now, let's paint the picture. You walk in feeling sluggish, irritable. Maybe you've got a headache, or a touch of melancholy, blame it on excess black bile. The barber examines your eyes, checks your tongue, and gives a thoughtful HMM. Then he reaches for the leech jar. Yes, leech jar. These aren't wild leeches, either. They're carefully selected from local bogs and streams, sometimes even imported. There's a hierarchy of leech quality, believe it or not. You might be getting the premium kind, if you're lucky. Your barber handles them like a man plucking grapes from a vine. He places one on your arm and waits patiently as it latches on, bloats, and falls off, engorged. You try not to look. Alternatively, he might make a small incision on the inside of your elbow and let the blood flow directly into a brass bowl. Some barbers used a special device called a famous small, spring-loaded blade meant to slice veins with terrifying efficiency. Others preferred lancets, and if you were particularly unlucky, the occasional sharpened quill. Historians still argue whether bloodletting was ever truly effective or just a placebo bolstered by tradition. What's clear is that for centuries, it was one of the most common treatments for everything from indigestion to plague. And barbers, they were the quiet workhorses of this gory ritual. You shift slightly in the chair, feeling the soft pinch of fabric bindings round your forearm, just tight enough to make the veins swell for easier access. Comforting, right? And while we're on the subject of bloodletting, here's a little quirk to savor. The barber wasn't just a medical practitioner. He was also a performer. The best ones had steady hands and entertaining stories. They knew how to distract you mid-cut, how to spin a tale just long enough to keep your mind off the blood running down your arm. It's said that some barbers even developed theatrical flair. They'd swirl their razor in the air, make grand pronouncements, how little tunes anything to keep their clients from fainting or bolting. You imagine the man before you doing the same, casually tossing a stained cloth onto the growing pile while discussing the local bishop's rash. Multitasking at its medieval finest. And here's something even weirder. Bloodletting wasn't just for the sick. It was preventative. People scheduled seasonal bleeds like dental cleanings, but more Dracula adjacent. Spring and autumn were the most popular times. You book a session, sit back, and let your barber drain you of a pint or two. Just enough to keep your body in harmony. The ritual had rules, too. Different veins corresponded to different ailments. For a headache, try the forehead vein. For melancholy, the basilic vein in your arm. For digestive woes, maybe something lower down. Your barber would have these memorized, or, failing that, he'd guess and hope for the best. Of course, this wasn't done in sterile silence. The barbershop was a hub of local gossip and community. Clients came not only to bleed, but to hear the latest news, complain about taxes, and brag about their surviving relatives. You might be flinching from a slice while the man next to you recounts how his cousin's goat wandered into the Lord's manor and ate half a tapestry. The barber, always cool-headed, moves fluidly between tasks. Shave this man, bleed that one, advise a third on wart removal. All in a day's work. You can't help but admire his efficiency even if the blade he's holding still looks a bit too enthusiastic. By the time your bleeding ends, you're a little lighter, a little woozier, and probably convinced that something in your humors has changed. Whether you're actually healthier, well, historians still debate that. But you rise from the chair, slightly pale but oddly satisfied. The barber wipes down your arm with a vinegar-soaked cloth, nods approvingly, and tosses the used rag into a wooden bucket. He's already turning to greet the next customer. You, meanwhile, are wondering if maybe next time, just a haircut. As you step out into the street, arm bandaged and beard slightly neater than before, your eye catches the tall pole just outside the shop. It spins gently in the wind, red and white stripes curling upward like a twisted candy cane. Familiar, yet strange. You've seen it outside every barbershop, but you've never really thought about what it means. Spoiler, it doesn't mean open for business. It means, quite literally, we bleed people here. That's right, the barber's pole, still used today as a nostalgic emblem, is a relic of medieval medical advertising. Back in your barber's heyday, it wasn't just decoration, it was a practical signpost for the ill and the unlucky. Here's the imagery. The red represents blood. The white stands for the bandages used to stop the bleeding, and in some versions, there's a touch of blue possibly symbolizing veins. Or maybe just added flair later on by patriotic pole manufacturers. The pole itself, that comes from the wooden stick patients were told to grip during bloodletting. Squeezing the stick helped veins bulge, making the barber's job easier. It also gave anxious hands something to do besides trembling. Sometimes, barbers would actually wrap the used bandages round the pole to dry. Picture it. Blood-soaked cloths spiraling upward, fluttering in the breeze, a sort of grotesque windsock that said, "We're open, and we've got leeches." Historians still argue whether this display was more functional than symbolic. Did it genuinely attract patients? Was it a warning? A flex of professional skill? Either way, it worked. Even today, that red and white twist is instantly recognizable. Your barber, of course, knows the story by heart. He might tell it to you while stropping his razor, dragging the blade back and forth over a strip of leather until it sings. It's a comforting sound, if you ignore what it implies. You glance back at the shop's pole now, thinking about how many arms it's seen drain, how many stories it's witnessed. In a world without billboards or flashy signs, the barber's pole was an unmissable symbol, equal parts helpful and horrifying. But your journey isn't over yet. You've got another appointment, not because you're sick, necessarily, but because you heard something about a quick cleaning. And it turns out, in medieval towns, that phrase is alarmingly versatile. Back inside, the barber gestures to a smaller stool. You sit, he tilts your head back, gently runs his fingers along your jawline, and gives a pleased hum. He's checking your teeth. Yes, barbers pulled teeth. In fact, the asterisk loved asterisk pulling teeth. It was one of their most common side hustles, especially in bustling towns where sugar consumption was on the rise. Tooth decay was a raging epidemic long before Flormid arrived on the scene. People chewed on lead-based makeup, downed wine with suspicious additives, and brushed their teeth with crushed bones and salt. The result? Molars with the texture of dried fruit. If you had a bad tooth, you went to the barber. He'd examine it, mutter something in Latin or, more likely, mumbled French or Middle English, and pull out his dental kit. Now brace yourself. These weren't delicate modern pliers. They were iron instruments with names like asterisk tooth key asterisk pelican asterisk, or asterisk elevator asterisk. The tooth key, for instance, looked like a miniature crank. He'd place it over your tooth, twist, and crack out it came, if all went well. If not, he might take a few more tries. No anesthesia, maybe a leather strap to bite down on, a shot of wine if you were lucky. Of course, some barbers added a touch of flair. Public extractions were common. Crowds would gather. The barber might perform his work with exaggerated gestures, whipping the tooth into the air and catching it to cheers. You wouldn't get a sticker or lollipop, but maybe a nod of admiration for not screaming too loud. And here's a little historical nugget. Some barbers faked extractions to boost business. They'd carry a small pouch of sheep's teeth, already bloodied, and pull one in a flourish before revealing it to the crowd. Look how clean the root is, they'd say. A perfect success. The crowd would nod, impressed, and a few more locals would shuffle forward with aching jaws. You might wonder, why would anyone trust a guy with clippers and scissors to yank teeth and open veins? Well, back then, medical knowledge was democratized by necessity. You didn't need a university degree to understand that someone with a festering molar needed help. And honestly, if your barber had strong hands, a steady grip, and a reasonably clean cloth, he was your best shot at relief. Plus, medieval people didn't see such divisions the way we do now. The line between beauty and health was porous. A man who could make you look good could also keep you alive, or at least upright. Today, we separate spa from surgery, but to your medieval barber, it was all care, from beard to bone. So here you are, mouth open, a cold metal tool hovering at your gum line. The barber looks focused, almost reverent. He tells you to count backwards from 10, though he doesn't actually wait for you to reach 8. A sharp twist, a crunch, a sound you will never forget. You spit into a wooden bowl. There's blood, of course, but also relief. The pressure's gone. Your head feels clearer. Or maybe that's just the blood loss. The barber grins. You're a good patient, he says. Tough. Maybe next time you let him try the new method for ear cleaning. You nod weakly, mouth full of cloth. And outside, the red and white tingles from the extraction part dullike, part strange emptiness where the tooth used to be. The barber hands you a cloth soaked in something sharp and herbal. Clove oil, maybe. He pats your shoulder like a proud uncle and turns to clean his tools in a basin that looks suspiciously like the same one used earlier for shaving water. As you sit there, the pain slowly giving way to the warm embrace of endorphins and resignation, your thoughts drift to a curious fact. This man isn't just improvising. He's operating within a tradition, a kind of unofficial medical career path that started with scissors and led, somehow, to sawing off legs on battlefields. Because barbers weren't just dentists, they were also surgeons. Let's rewind to the 13th and 14th centuries. Formal physicians, those university-trained, robe-wearing, Latin-quoting scholars didn't get their hands dirty. Their specialty was theory. They diagnosed, prognosed, and prescribed. But they rarely cut into flesh. Surgery, in their view, was manual labor too bloody, too lowly. Guess who stepped into the void? Yes, your friendly neighborhood barber. He already had blades, after all. He already knew how to steady a squirming head for a shave. How different could it be to steady an arm for amputation? And so, slowly but surely, barbers took on the role of practical surgeons. Battlefield injuries, swollen abscess, boil that looks like it's developing a personality. Yep, still the barber. But this wasn't just village guesswork. Barber surgeons developed real expertise. Many trained through apprenticeship, learning by watching older barbers work their messy magic. They kept notebooks, passed down techniques, and even traveled to learn new methods. In some cases, they were the only practitioners who understood the reality of surgery, what infections looked like, how skin responded to different cuts, which patients bled more than others. There's a quiet dignity to it. While the physicians theorized about humors from the safety of monasteries and academic halls, the barbers worked on the front lines literally. During wars, they accompanied armies. Imagine a medieval battlefield, mud, blood, and the constant thunder of hooves. You're hit with a mace or a flying arrow. There's no time for a consultation or a slow diagnosis. You're dragged behind the lines, and there he is, the barber-surgeon, sleeves rolled up, knife in hand, already soaking a cloth in wine for you to bite. Historians still argue whether this fusion of grooming and medical care was born out of genuine innovation or sheer necessity. Were barbers the ultimate improvisers, or were they simply filling in the gaps left by a divided medical system? Either way, their place was undeniable. Let's follow a battlefield barber for a moment. You picture him crouched next to a soldier whose leg is barely hanging on. No morphine, no sterilization, just linen strips, iron saws, and raw nerve. The barber works first. He knows speed is everything, both for the soldier's survival and for his own sanity. He amputates just above the wound, then cauterizes the stump with a red-hot iron. The soldier screams, thrashes, goes limp. Maybe from pain, maybe from shock. The barber doesn't flinch. He's already moving to the next body. When the battle ends, he might return to town and switch seamlessly back to beard trims and tooth pulls. One day, he's dressing wounds with poultices made of honey and moldy bread. The next, he's cutting bangs for the baker's wife. His hands never stop moving. You glance at your own barber now, folding a towel with almost meditative precision. There's a stillness to him, a calm, not just from years of cutting hair, but from something deeper. A familiarity with bodies in distress. A muscle memory of tending to people on the edge. The tools he uses might look simple: knife, cloth, forceps, but he knows them intimately. He's honed them against both skin and circumstance. Even today, some barbershops, especially in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, offer a blend of grooming and minor medical care. Ear cleaning, wound dressing, even herbal treatments. Echoes of the barber-surgeon live on, thousands of years after their peak. And speaking of echoes, ever notice how people still talk about barbers with a strange blend of trust and fear? The way a good haircut can feel like therapy, or the wrong blade angle can feel like a decapitation attempt. That's not entirely modern anxiety. It's muscle memory from an era when a trick to the barber really could go either way. You stretch your jaw gently, it still aches, but less than before. The barber checks on you with a quick nod, eyes scanning your color, your balance. He's assessing your humors, whether he realizes it or not. And for a brief moment, you understand why people relied on him, not just because he was there, but because he stayed. Through plague, through battle, through childbirth and festering wounds, the barber stayed. He didn't just cut hair, he cut fear. The barber wipes his hands on a rag that has seen far better days, stained with a palette of human experience, you might say. As he sets his tools aside, you begin to understand that what you just witnessed isn't the exception. This is the norm in a world where professional titles bleed into each other as freely as the patients do. And here's the fascinating twist. All of this bloodletting, amputations, leech application, even minor surgeries didn't require a medical degree. In fact, it didn't even require literacy. In medieval Europe, particularly before the 16th century, medicine was more tradition than science. Doctors trained at universities, if you could afford it, where they studied Galen, Hippocrates, and Avicenna, but rarely touched a living patient. Barbers, on the other hand, learned their trade the old-fashioned way, apprenticeship. You'd start as a boy, sweeping hair and boiling cloths. Then, slowly, you graduate to holding the basin. Eventually, if you didn't faint too often, you'd be handed a razor. Licensing, that was for nobles. If you had a steady hand, a sharp eye, and maybe a family member who didn't mind being your first practice boil, you were in. A barber's shop was both classroom and clinic. This all might sound terrifying, especially from a modern point of view where certifications, diplomas, and malpractice insurance are the minimum expectations. But remember, most villages didn't even have a resident physician, and the ones who did, they were expensive, far away, or simply too busy debating the balance of humors to actually treat people. So barbers filled the gap. They learned what worked by seeing what didn't. They carried knowledge like torchlight through the dark. Historians still argue whether this learning-on-the-job system was beneficial or catastrophic. Some believe it led to generations of trial-and-error quackery. Others argue it preserved vital medical practices in communities that would otherwise have had no care at all. Either way, it was the barber's world, and everyone else just bled in it. Let's step into the shoes of an apprentice for a moment. You're 12. You've been handed your first task, sterilizing the leech jar. Not because you're ready, but because your master is busy extracting a molar from the village miller. You do your best. You boil water in a tin pot, wipe down the tools with vinegar and cheap fat, and try not to breathe too deeply. The smell is part iron, part mildew, with a faint background note of dry chamomile and fear. Soon, you are watching your master perform his craft. He slices an abscess, drains it into a cloth, then sews it shut with picket thread, tying the knot with the same fingers he'll use to shape a mustache later that afternoon. You're expected to memorize every motion, every step, not from a textbook but from repetition, intuition, and whispered correction. At the end of the day, your reward, maybe a crust of bread, maybe a nod of approval, maybe you get to help sharpen the razors. You feel proud. You've touched the edge of something powerful, something real. You don't know Latin. You've never seen a university, but you've cleaned wounds, changed bandages, and held people's hands as they cried out from the sting of vinegar poured into an open sore. You, young apprentice, are becoming a barber-surgeon. This informal education system helped barbering remain widespread. It was accessible. You didn't need noble blood or people blessing. You needed guts, and ideally, a low tolerance for squeamishness. Now, here's a quirky little tidbit. Some barber apprentices would travel between towns to broaden their experience, like a medieval version of job shadowing. They'd show up in a neighboring village, offer to assist the local barber, and in return, learn new techniques. How to set a broken finger using boiled cloth and splints carved from fence posts. How to clean a sword wound with garlic and soot. How to sedate a patient using beer, prayers, and a firm grip. These roaming apprentices sometimes doubled as newsbearers, spreading gossip and tales from town to town. They were walking, talking scalpels of society, cutting through borders and customs, bringing knowledge wherever they went. Of course, some barbers did study a bit of medicine. Those lucky enough to live near a city might sneak into lectures or at least read borrowed texts by candlelight. Others learned anatomy from the only source available, the battlefield. You'd be surprised how much you can discover about a liver when it's halfway out of someone. Back in your barber's shop, you watch as he rolls up a scroll pinned to the wall. It's hand-drawn, ink fading, showing a vaguely human figure covered in dotted lines and labeled points. The bloodletting man, they call him. He's the medieval blueprint for where to open up a patient based on their ailment. Suffering from gout? Slice near the ankle. Got a sore throat? Maybe try the forearm. Logical, debatable, but this was the barber's Bible. He glances at the diagram, then at you, eyes twinkling. Still got all your fingers, yes. He jokes. You laugh nervously. You don't remember agreeing to any finger-related procedures. Still, you can't help but feel a bit safer here. It's not sterile. It's not professional by modern standards. But it's honest. The barber doesn't hide behind robes or titles. He shows you the blade. He shows you the risk. And he shows up every day when others might not. And in a world full of uncertainty, that might be the closest thing to medicine anyone gets. The day's light is beginning to shift, casting long amber streaks through the warped glass of the shop's single window. You're still seated, a bit lighter in blood, one tooth down, but oddly calm, like someone who's endured something quietly heroic without really meaning to. The barber pours you a small cup of something warm, bitter, possibly half fermented. You sip it anyway. He's already preparing for the next job. From a shelf, he pulls down a roll of cloth, some stitched leather straps, and what looks like a pair of forceps made by a blacksmith with a flair for menace. There's a knock at the door. A pale-faced man stumbles in, clutching his side. You don't ask what happened, you already know who's going to handle it. Here's the strange truth you've now seen up close. There's no medical license hanging on the wall. No degree, no framed congratulations. You are now qualified to poke open a lung parchment. And yet, here he is gutting, sewing, diagnosing, and advising. It's not madness, it's the medieval system. In this era, formal medical education is largely confined to cloistered universities. You'd find it in Bologna, Paris, Montpellier, places where students sit on stone benches and debate Galenic theory for hours. They study anatomy, yes, but often from ancient texts, not actual bodies. In some cases, they've never even seen the inside of a human being. Meanwhile, your barber has seen hundreds, not as a scientist, but as a craftsman. His knowledge doesn't come from books, it comes from experience, scars, and the memory of screams. You might find it comforting or horrifying to learn that medieval licensing, when it existed, was often issued by guilds or local councils. In many towns, barbers had to pass a test not written, of course, but practical. Could you perform a bloodletting without fainting? Could you remove a tooth without breaking the jaw? If so, you were in. Some barbers, particularly those in larger cities, did begin to organize. They formed official barbers' companies or barbers' guilds. These weren't just social clubs, they regulated training, enforced standards well, sorted and protected their members from rival trades. Historians still argue whether these early medical guilds were effective. Did they raise standards or just gatekeep knowledge? Were they public-spirited or profit-protecting? Like most things in the Middle Ages, the answer is probably yes. Now, if you were lucky enough to train in London in the 14th century, you might have joined the company of barbers. There, you'd apprentice under a master for 7 years, gradually earning the right to wear the long apron and wield the lancet. Over time, These organizations would begin to splinter, especially as the lines between barber and surgeon became more contentious. But for now, they coexist in a hazy middle ground of practicality and pain management. In the countryside, things are far looser. A man with tools, a clean rack, and a willingness to lance something foul-smelling could simply declare himself open for business. And people would come. Because when your eye's infected or your leg's gone purple, you don't shop round for credentials. You look for a man who won't flinch. The barber wasn't just useful, he was familiar. He lived in your village. He knew your grandmother's cough and your brother's limp. He wasn't aloof. He was embedded. And perhaps that's why people trusted him. There's something deeply human about this arrangement. It's not sterile. It's not safe by today's standards. But it is deeply rooted in community. The barber wasn't a distant expert, he was the guy who helped your uncle survive a stab wound, and then gave your cousin a bowl cut 2 days later. You glance again at the man across from you. His hands are stained. Yes, but they're also steady. He's humming now. An old tune, off-key but soothing. He's not in a rush. The next client waits by the door, already undoing his tunic to show a blistered patch of skin. The barber doesn't recoil. He leans in. Let's talk about what separates this man from the real doctors of his day besides the hat. Doctors, especially university-trained ones, saw themselves as scholars. Think gowns, scrolls, and endless debate. They focused on diagnosis, not treatment. Surgery was considered crude, manual labor. Cutting into flesh, that was for tradesmen. They might advise a patient to be bled, but they wouldn't do it themselves. That's where the barber came in. You might say the physician wrote the recipe, and the barber cooked the meal with whatever knives he had on hand. And over time, some barbers embraced that role fully. They specialized in the things doctors wouldn't touch: setting bones, draining abscesses, cutting out rotten flesh. They weren't just improvising. They were developing methods, refining tools, and building reputations. Some were even called upon by kings and nobles. One of the most famous barber-surgeons in history, Ambroise Paré, a 16th century Frenchman who revolutionized battlefield surgery and wound care. Though he eventually rose to royal court status, he started, like many others, as a humble barber's apprentice. He rejected cauterization with boiling oil in favor of a soothing balm of aguque, rose oil, and turpentine, less painful, and surprisingly more effective. A radical idea at the time. So you see, there's lineage here. Your barber is part of a tradition. A messy, unpredictable, strangely comforting tradition. And though you haven't asked, you can already sense this is someone who's learned from bodies, not books. He finishes wiping his hands. Another customer, another wound. He gestures for the next patient. You quietly move to the bench, rubbing your jaw, grateful for the strange, blood-soaked wisdom of the man with the razor. As you shift on the bench and let your pulse settle, the barber welcomes in his next patient with the same calm and free air. The man older, with a limp and neither doesn't quite track straight, slides into the chair, lifts his sleeve, and says something about that old swelling again. The barber nods knowingly, as if they've danced this dance before. You get the sense this is as much about ritual as it is about remedy. But what you don't know yet is how much of this strange career path was shaped by religion and, more specifically, by asterisk monks and los asterisk. See, in earlier centuries, much of Europe's basic medical care was actually handled by monastic orders. The monks, these men of the cloth, were more than just scribes and singers. They were often the only people round who could read medical texts. Monasteries maintained herb gardens, produced ointments, and offered what we might today call community health services. If your boils were acting up or your humor seemed off, you went to the monastery. That is, until the church decided things were getting a little too bloody. In 1163, At the Council of Tours, the church issued a famous prohibition, *Ecclesia abhorrita sanguine*, the church abhors blood. Simply put, monks were no longer allowed to perform surgical procedures. Too gory, too messy, not in keeping with the spiritual mission. This ban effectively removed the only semi-educated practitioners willing to cut someone open. So who stepped in? Yep, barbers. They were already hanging round the monasteries anyway, trimming tonsures, those famous monk haircuts with the bald spot in the middle. It wasn't a huge leap from trimming hair to draining abscesses, especially when the monks started saying, "Can you handle this part for us?" And so began a quiet but profound handoff. Monks continued to diagnose, but barbers took over the incisions. Monasteries outsourced the bloodletting, and just like that, the barber's role expanded from cosmetic to clinical. Historians still argue how quickly and thoroughly this transition took place. Some believe monks kept their scalpels tucked under their robes for emergency use. Others think the barbers were all too eager to scoop up the extra business. Either way, the barber had now earned a new kind of spiritual endorsement, oddly enough, by being considered *less holy and more practical. The result? Barbers became the secular stand-ins for a clerical medicine. They gained not only access to a growing number of patients, but also a kind of sacred legitimacy. They were healing without being doctors, and cutting without being unclean. This division between the high-minded diagnosis of monks and physicians, and the hands-on, bloody work of barbers persisted for centuries. It created a two-tiered system: those who prescribed and those who performed. The brains and the blades. Your barber, of course, isn't thinking about ecclesiastical rulings as he tightens the cloth tourniquet round his patient's arm. He's just doing what needs to be done. But somewhere, tucked into this daily rhythm, is a history shaped by the Vatican's discomfort with gore. The Church's ban did more than change who held the knife, it shifted the entire structure of European medicine. It gave rise to a workforce of lay practitioners who were embedded in everyday life, not cloistered in stone towers. You start to notice more now. The barber's little altar tucked in the corner, with a candle and a carved wooden saint. A soft murmur of a prayer before he makes the first incision. Maybe not official doctrine, but a habit of respect. A ritual of remembrance. Even in blood, there is grace. And here's another curious ripple effect. Because barbers were often associated with monasteries, they also learned from the monks. Herbal remedies, sanitation practices, even anatomy, through whispered instruction or stolen glances at monastery scrolls. The barber wasn't just a cutter, he was a sponge for knowledge, gathering scraps wherever he could. Some barbers even became scribes in their own way. They kept notebooks, passed on recipes for poultices, and recorded successful treatments. It wasn't Latin-heavy scholarship, but it was practical, tested wisdom, what we'd now call field research. And unlike the monks, barbers had the freedom to roam. They moved between villages, spread innovations, adapted to needs. So you could say that monk and barber formed a peculiar, passive partnership, one enforced by decree but sustained by utility. You think back to that council ruling. No more blood for the men of the cloth. But it didn't stop the bleeding, it just shifted the responsibility. And in the process, gave birth to an entire class of accidental medics. You glance again at the tools on the table. The curved blade, the linen strips, the bowl of vinegar. Tools that once might have been seen as sinful, now wielded with humble competence by a man who doesn't wear robes, but knows your body better than the bishop ever could. As the patient rises, unbound and grateful, the barber offers him a piece of dried apple and a smile. He turns back to you, ready for your next round. He asks with a chuckle. You shake your head. You've had quite enough theology-adjacent healthcare for one afternoon, but you can't help but admire it. Not just the technique, but the legacy. The quiet confidence of someone whose profession was shaped not just by need, but by the absence of others. A profession handed down not by choice but by decree. And somehow, they made it work. You're leaning back now, the edge of the bench softened by the weight of the afternoon. Somewhere outside, a cart rattles over cobblestones. Inside, your barber is tying off a linen bundle of used cloths, humming a folk tune that sounds like it's been passed down longer than any textbook. He stretches his back, wipes his brow, and looks at you with a knowing smile, the kind a man gives when he's about to tell you just how important his job really is. And he's not wrong. Because if you think barbers were minor players in this world of swords and saints, think again. In times of war, famine, plague, and dental disaster, the barber wasn't just helpful, he was indispensable. Let's start with the plague. Imagine the year is 1348. The Black Death is sweeping through Europe. Half the town's physicians have fled, those who haven't already succumbed themselves. The apothecaries are overwhelmed. The priests are busy preparing the dying for the afterlife. Who's left? You're a barber. He doesn't run. He doesn't hide. He keeps his door open, his basin scrubbed, and his razors sharp. People come to him with sores, with coughs, with despair in their eyes. He applies salves. He lances buboes. He bleeds them. Of course, though, it won't help. But it's something. It's a ritual. It gives people the illusion of control in a world spinning wildly apart. And that's no small thing. Some barbers even became known for their bravery during outbreaks. They were the ones who showed up, again and again, with vinegar-soaked cloths and iron tools, knowing full well the risk. They weren't saints, but they were there. Historians still argue whether barber-surgeons actually made any difference during plagues. Most of their treatments, bleeding, purging, herbal concoctions, did little to stop the spread. But psychologically, spiritually, in terms of community morale, that's harder to measure. Imagine your child is feverish and swollen. The town doctor is hiding in his estate, but the barber answers your knock. He looks tired, but he smiles. He tells you it might help to open a vein. You nod, you let him do it, and for a brief moment, you feel like you're not completely helpless. That counts for something. Outside of pandemics, barbers were a fixture of normal life, especially when normal included near-daily accidents involving livestock, blades, or drunken brawls. Someone breaks a nose, the barber sets it. Someone's ear gets half bitten off in a tavern dispute. He stitches it back, not well, necessarily, but enough to make it stop bleeding. You'd find him in castles, too. Noble families kept private barbers, not just for hair, but for health. A trustworthy barber-surgeon might travel with a lord, serving as both stylist and standby medic. He'd be the one to deal with ingrown toenails, aching joints, and the occasional arrow in the thigh. He'd trim your beard in the morning and lance your infected knee by sundown. And in towns, the barber shop was more than a place of grooming. It was a social hub. Men gathered there to swap gossip, argue politics, and get patched up all in one sitting. A one-stop shop for local knowledge, minor surgery, and beard oil. Of course, barbers also played a vital role in death. When someone passed away, especially in monasteries or noble households, it was often the barber who prepared the body. He'd shave the face, close the mouth, clean the wounds. A quiet final act of service. There's something sacred about that, even if it wasn't officially recognized. By now, you've noticed the duality of this man. Part healer, part craftsman, part gossip, part grim reaper. One foot in the mundane, the other in the visceral. And he wasn't doing it for glory. The barber's work was hard, messy, and often thankless. And like physicians, he didn't wear fancy robes or speak from behind gilded lecterns. He got blood on his apron. He scrubbed his tools by firelight. He endured the screams and the silences. He took pride in surviving. It's said some barbers developed a dark sense of humor, gallows jokes to get through the worst days. You can imagine it, can't you? A man comes in with a nail through his hand, and the barber sighs, "Well, at least it's not your drinking hand." Chuckles all round, then back to work. That humor wasn't cruel. It was necessary. It was the thread that stitched their minds together after days filled with pus, pain, and prayer. And let's not forget the women. Barber-surgeons were predominantly men, due to guild restrictions and cultural norms. But in some communities, especially rural ones, women took on similar rules, though rarely with formal recognition. Midwives, herbalists, healers. They were often friends with the local barber, swapping knowledge and remedies, borrowing tools. In that way, medical care was a shared burden, passed hand to hand like a worn comb or a sharpened lancet. You glance at your barber again. He's cleaning a small cut on the knuckle of a man who claims he tripped over his own goat. He doesn't ask too many questions, just rinses, wraps, and pats the man's hand like a school teacher might. It's not glamorous work, but in a world where bones break, teeth rot, and wounds fester, it's the barber who shows up with thread, vinegar, and calm hands. He may not wear a doctor's hat, but he's got scars, and sometimes that's the better credential. Evening has settled in like a slow yawn across the village. Outside, the sky fades from ochre to blue, then sinks into a velvet hush. The lantern in the barber shop is lit now, burning low, casting everything in gold and shadow. The last few patients trickle in, quieter than before, worn by the day's weight. The room feels smaller in the night, more intimate. You sit back as your barber returns, his apron a patchwork of the day's work, his eyes still sharp. Tonight, he's going to show you his tools. Not the scissors or the razor, those are just the friendly faces. No, tonight he brings out the real collection, wrapped in waxed cloth, tucked in a wooden case lined with soft wool to muffle the clatter. He unfolds the roll carefully, like revealing a secret. You lean in. First, the *fleam*, a compact, triangular blade used for bloodletting. It looks almost elegant until you imagine it punching through skin with a single pop. Beside it sits a *cautery iron *, long and blackened, used to sear wounds shut. It would be heated in the fire until glowing red, then pressed directly against the flesh. You can almost smell the scorched wool from past patients. Then comes the *tooth key *, resembling a miniature corkscrew with a hook. It was the favored tool for tooth extractions. Place it over the tooth, twist, and out it comes hopefully. If not, try again. And again. There's also the pelican *, another dental device named for its vaguely beak shape. Less twisting, more yanking. Slightly less horrifying in theory, but only just. You spot curved knives for abscess lancing, long needles for suturing, and a few mystery items that even your barber admits are probably from my grandfather's kit. Never figured out what this one does. There's a pouch of dried herbs, willow bark for pain, yarrow for bleeding, some ground alum, a pinch of sulfur, and a small horn vial that smells like it hasn't been opened since the last plague. Each tool tells a story. Each one bears the nicks and stains of hundreds of encounters, most of them unrecorded. This isn't a sterile surgical tray, it's a battlefield memoir. Historians still argue about how standardized these kits were. Some barber surgeons carried identical setups, taught by guilds and passed down through generations. Others cobbled their gear together from local blacksmiths and borrowed items. What's certain is that these tools weren't made for show. They were made to do and often, to do in the most uncomfortable of circumstances. And unlike today's disposable medical equipment, these tools were treasured. They were cleaned, repaired, sharpened, blessed, cursed, and reused until the handles were smooth. A good blade could last a lifetime and might outlast the barber himself. There's a reverence in the way he handles them. Not fear, not pride, just familiarity. Like a craftsman laying out chisels before carving a statue, or a butcher readying his cleaver. This isn't gore, it's routine. You ask softly how often he uses them. More than you'd think, he replies. And less than I fear. He wraps the tools again and sets them aside, like tucking a child into bed. Then he sits, wipes his hands on his apron, looks at you for a long moment. You learn their names, he says, meaning the people. Even when you don't ask for them. The ones who scream, the ones who don't, the ones who come back, the ones who don't. There's no drama in his voice, just memory. He tells you about a young soldier with a belly wound who held his hand the whole time. About a baker's wife with an abscess that burst like a fruit. About a boy who wouldn't stop bleeding no matter how tightly he bound the limb. He doesn't say whether they lived. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that he tried. That's what this toolkit means. Not power, not prestige, but readiness. The quiet willingness to say, I will help, even when help is messy and painful and sometimes doesn't work. And here's a strange little aside. Barbers were often the first to adopt new tools. Because they worked outside the academic halls, they weren't bound by tradition. If a blacksmith made a better clamp, a barber would try it. If a traveler brought a new herb, he'd test it. Innovation didn't always trickle down from universities, it often bubbled up from the barbershop floor. That curious blend of intuition and invention kept barber-surgeons on the front edge of practical medicine. They couldn't always explain why something worked, but they knew when it did. So the tools change, the blades evolve, but the hands remain the same hands that cut, cauterize, comfort, and clean. And hands that, at the end of the day, still pour you a warm drink and ask how you're feeling. You thank him, quietly, not just for showing you the tools, but for using them when no one else would. Outside, the streets have gone silent. Inside, the tools are folded away, but their stories linger, sharp and steady, like the edge of a well-kept razor. You don't realize how long you've been sitting in the shop until you notice the oil in the lantern beginning to sputter, casting fluttering shadows on the walls. Your barber stretches, rubs his eyes, and reaches under the counter to retrieve a second bundle, not of tools this time, but parchment. Rolled scrolls, some dusty, others more recent. He unrolls one with care. You glance down. It's not a diagram, not a drawing of humors or bleeding charts. It's a charter part of the local barber guild records. At the top, in bold looping letters, it reads, Asterisk Fraternity of Barbers and Surgeons, asterisk. You blink at the word. Surgeons, the old spelling for surgeons. The very word itself feels like it requires stitches. Guilds, it turns out, were a huge part of how barbers navigated their way into and sometimes out of the medical world. And these weren't your average neighborhood watch meetings. These were powerful, often fiercely political organizations that shaped who could cut what and where. In medieval cities across Europe, barbers organized not just to protect their jobs, but to elevate them. They set training standards, lobbied for legal rights, and, perhaps most importantly, fended off the encroaching gaze of more elite medical practitioners. Because as barber surgeons gained skill, visibility, and popularity, university-trained physicians began to feel uneasy. It wasn't just about class, though, that played a big role. It was about control. Physicians had spent decades turning medicine into an intellectual pursuit. Barbers, with their bloody aprons and hands-on methods, reminded everyone that health was still a very physical business. And so, tensions rose. Some cities issued decrees limiting what barbers could do. Others required barbers to work under the supervision of physicians, though most physicians wouldn't be caught dead near an open wound. In some cases, barber-surgeons were allowed to perform surgery, but banned from giving diagnoses. You could cut, but not think. Historians still argue whether these restrictions were about protecting patients or simply protecting power. What's clear is that barber guilds fought back not with swords, but with ink and alliances. In London, for instance, two powerful guilds emerged: the Company of Barbers and the Company of Surgeons. For a time, they coexisted like two wolves circling the same carcass. But in 1540, King Henry VIII stepped in. In a bizarre act of royal compromise, he forced the two groups to merge. Thus was born the Company of Barber-surgeons. It was a marriage of necessity, not love. Surgeons grumbled about sharing status with barbers. Barbers resented the new bureaucracy. But the king, fond of keeping his head intact and presumably interested in maintaining order in the messy medical world, made it law. Your barber taps the scroll with a crooked finger. All politics, he mutters. And he's right. Because the history of medicine isn't just scalpels and cures, it's also battles for legitimacy. Titles, turf, this guild paperwork. It's more than just ink on vellum. It's proof of identity. Proof that your barber isn't just that guy with the razor. He's part of a recognized trade. He's someone who had to earn his place not by memorizing theory, but by holding a blade steady when it counted. You wonder what it must have been like during those guild debates. Picture it, in some dim hall, by candlelight, surgeons and barbers arguing over whether draining an abscess counted as real surgery, whether barbers should be allowed to use surgical implements with curved blades, whether trimming a beard made a man less qualified to remove a tumor. In many places, barbers were eventually forced to stick to sheathing and minor procedures, or pursue full surgical status and leave the scissors behind. The split wasn't always clean. Some continued to blur the line well into the 18th century, especially in rural areas where labels mattered less than results. And yet, some barber surgeons did rise through the ranks. They gained royal appointments, published books, trained apprentices who would one day become the first professional surgeons of the modern age. One such figure was John of Ardenne, the 14th century Englishman often considered one of the fathers of modern surgery. He wrote detailed texts on treating anal fistulas and pleasant work, but critical. He believed in careful observation and experience over rigid theory. And yes, he started out doing work not unlike what your barber does today. The barber rolls up the parchment and puts it away, perhaps a little wistfully. Maybe he sees himself in those scribbled names. Maybe he remembers a time when his trade wasn't so contested. Outside, the wind picks up slightly. A shutter taps against the wall. Your barber begins tidying up for the night. He oils his blades, wipes the counter, stacks the bowls. The room smells of vinegar and lavender and something faintly metallic. The lantern's flame flickers, casting brief halos over the tools. You realize now, the politics didn't take away the work. They just changed how it was labeled. Behind the arguments and paperwork, people still needed someone to set their bones, to stop the bleeding, to pull the tooth no one. And when the scholars went home to argue Galen versus Avicenna, your barber stayed, with his razors, his tools, and his guild badge tucked into a box he rarely opens but never forgets. The barber closes the lid on the box of scrolls and stands, joints creaking like floorboards in a quiet room. He moves across the shop in the low light, reaches up to a narrow shelf, and pulls down a squat glass jar. It's filled with something wriggling. You squint, and there they are again, leeches. Fat, blackish brown, coiled like apostrophes at the bottom of cloudy water. You don't recall, surprisingly. After everything else you've seen today, leeches feel almost quaint. The barber lifts the jar with a reverent care usually reserved for holy relics. He chuckles. You'd be surprised how many people still ask for these, he says. Swear by them. For fever, for swelling, for just feeling off. Leeches weren't just a medieval gimmick. For centuries, they were considered cutting-edge, no pun intended. They represented a natural, almost elegant solution to the age-old problem of too much blood. If bloodletting with a knife was a hammer, leeches were the scalpel. Gentle, slow, slightly sinister, and they weren't used randomly. There was a method. Placement mattered. For headaches, you'd place them near the temples. For liver issues, near the right side of the abdomen. For general imbalance, elbows, behind the knees, anywhere soft and full of promise. Historians still argue whether the results were real or imagined. Did the leeches genuinely help by reducing blood pressure or inflammation? Or did they simply provide a sense of action in a time when most medicine involved praying and hoping? Either way, they were wildly popular and expensive. The best leeches were imported from the Balkans or marshy regions of France. Apothecaries stocked them. Barbers bred them. In some towns, entire ponds were dedicated to their cultivation. You watch as the barber holds one up in the light. It stretches languidly, sensing warmth. We name them sometimes, he murmurs. This one's Bartholomew. You don't know whether he's joking. It doesn't matter. What's fascinating is how central this practice became to barbering. In fact, during the 18th and 19th centuries, yes, long after the medieval period, leeches experienced a resurgence. Known as leech mania physicians and barbers alike applied them to patients with a frequency that would make modern phlebotomists faint. In France alone, over 30 million leeches were used in 1 year. Even royalty got in on it. Napoleon's physicians applied leeches liberally to treat everything from fatigue to indigestion. And in England, barbers proudly advertised their fresh leeches in window signs, right next to mustache wax and hair tonics. You're a barber, naturally, prefers the traditional technique. He keeps the leeches in cool water, lets them rest between feedings, and knows exactly when they're ready to work. He opens a side ledger, a kind of patient book. Not organized, really. Just names, notes, dates, and scribbled remarks like left ear bled clean or tolerated to leeches, for a third. This isn't superstition, it's record keeping, a barber's version of a medical chart. And you can't help but respect it. You ask him whether he actually believes the leeches help. He shrugs. I've seen people feel better, he says. That's enough for me. There's humility in that answer. Not a claim of miracle cures or mystical forces, just a quiet confidence in the human desire to feel like something is being done. And sometimes, that's half the healing. He returns Bartholomew to the jar, replaces the lid, places the whole thing back on the shelf like a family heirloom. You sit with the image for a moment. Jars of leeches, scrolls of guild lore, blood-stained razors, and a man who moves between all of them like a musician changing instruments mid-song. Here's a funny detail: many barbers charged separate fees for leeches. You could buy one to take home, like a living prescription. Keep it on your nightstand. Apply it when the mood was right or when your back ached. Sort of like an old-world heating pad, but hungrier. And unlike a lancet or phlegm, leeches didn't leave scars. That made them especially popular with the nobility, who valued smooth skin as much as stable humors. Gentle bleeding, minimal mess. A cosmetic procedure disguised as medicine. You wonder how many nobles lay back in their silken beds, eyes closed, letting leeches do their work by candlelight while downstairs their barber-surgeon packed top for the evening and trudged home smelling of vinegar and iron. Not much has changed, really. The tools look different, the science is sharper, but the need for a trust, for a comfort, for a warm voice in a time of pain remains. The barber sits again, rolling his shoulders. He's quiet now, not tired, just still. You sense that for him, the day isn't measured in hours, but in pulses slowed, wounds closed, blood stopped. And maybe, in a strange way, lives made a little lighter by blade, by bomb, or by leech. The air in the shop is denser now, not oppressive, just heavy with quiet. The kind of stillness that seeps in after long hours of doing, of tending, of keeping people together. You've long since stopped looking at the barber with modern eyes. What once seemed odd, this fusion of groomer and healer, now feels entirely logical. Natural, even. The barber lights a small stick of resinous incense, something herbal and earthy. It swirls slowly in the air, mingling with the scent of dried lavender, iron and dust. He gestures for you to stay seated. One more story, he says, almost conspiratorially. Something to pass the time. And so begins a tale from the tonsorium, the medieval barbershop. But not just any tale. Asterisk gossip session asterisk, really. Because if there's one thing barbers were as good at as cutting and cauterizing, it was talking. They knew everyone. They heard everything. And when people sat in that chair, with razors at their throats or leeches on their legs, they talked. About their neighbors, their dreams, their aches, their secrets. Barbershops were information hubs before newspapers existed. Want to know who's getting married? Who had a boil lanced in an embarrassing place? Who's faking sick to avoid taxes? Ask your barber. Or better yet, just asterisk listen asterisk. In some cities, barber-surgeons became so central to the social fabric that they were used as informal messengers, go-betweens, even spies. Imagine it. A man comes in complaining about his gums. While the barber digs round his molars, he casually mentions that the merchant to streets over seems to have come into a suspicious amount of gold. The barber nods, cleans the blood off his forceps, and files that little detail away. Historians still debate how much political influence barbers truly wielded. But in many places, they were trusted by everyone from peasants to knights. When you're the one holding the razor to someone's jugular, people tend to confide in you, or at least behave. And here's a charming quirk. Barbers often became matchmakers. Not professionally, of course, but they'd overhear one client lamenting his lonely heart, and another gushing about a certain merchant's daughter with rosy cheeks and decent teeth. The barber would nod sagely, maybe nudge a meeting into existence, then sit back and watch. And then there were the personal confessions. Oh, the confessions. You're having your beard trimmed. You've had a few ales. You wince as the razor grazes a fresh nick on your chin. And then you sigh and you say it. That thing you've been holding in. The money you hid from your wife. The regret about your brother. The strange dream you had about wolves and your old tutor. The barber listens. He's not shocked. He's heard worse. Much worse. In a sense, he becomes a sort of secular confessor. A keeper of whispered sins and secrets. And unlike the priest, he doesn't judge. He just hums, or shrugs, or tells you he once pulled a tooth from a man who swore it contained the voice of the devil. And so, the barbershop becomes a space of soft absolution. You walk in with weight on your chest and walk out a little lighter, whether from bloodletting or from just asterisk letting it out asterisk. The barber you're sitting with now seems to carry dozens of such stories, maybe hundreds. You can see it in his eyes, the way he pauses before responding, the way his hands move with both care and detachment. He's been trusted with the things people can't say aloud anywhere else, and he keeps them, not out of obligation, but because that, too, is part of the job. Barber-surgeons weren't trained in psychology. They didn't have patient confidentiality rules, but they had something more enduring, the practice of presence. The asterisk were their asterisk, always there, with an open chair, a warm rag, a sharp blade, and ears that remembered. You ask quietly if he ever told the secrets he heard. He smiles. No, only the funny ones. And yes, some of the stories were funny. Like the nobleman who passed out from the sight of his own ingrown toenail, or the priest who came in swearing he had a demon in his stomach, but it turned out to be a lodged plumpet, or the town drunk who swore that leeches whispered to him where no one else would. These tales passed from barber to apprentice, growing wilder with every retelling. They became part of the shop's wallpaper, part of the air. You lean back, close your eyes briefly. You imagine the room over decades. The faces changing, the tools aging, but the stories still here, still echoing. And in this, too, there's healing. Because sometimes what hurts isn't the wound. It's the loneliness, the sense that no one sees you bleeding. And the barber, without making a fuss, always sees asterisk. Not just your teeth or your scalp or your festering abscess, but your asterisk. The whole, strange, fumbling human that walked into his chair hoping, somehow, to feel better. He hands you a warm cloth. You wipe your hands, not because they're dirty, but because it feels right. Ritual again. And he says, "You've been sitting here a while, but I don't mind. Most people don't stay." You smile. You're not most people. You stayed for other stories. The shop is quiet now in the way only old spaces can be filled, with the creaks of settling wood and the ticking of things not quite mechanical. You're no longer just a visitor. You feel absorbed into the barber's rhythm, part of the furniture. One of the lingering souls who came in for something simple and stayed for something deeper. The barber stretches his legs and leans back in his own chair, an older, sturdier thing. Its arms smoothed by decades of elbows and the slow rub of woolen sleeves. He glances at the ceiling beams, thoughtful. You ever wonder? He says, what happens when a barber is needed in a time when no one wants to bleed anymore? You blink, unsure if it's because slowly, over the centuries, people did stop wanting to bleed. Not entirely, but gradually. Science crept in, anatomy shifted from guesswork to study. Germs were discovered, microscopes emerged, and suddenly, being a physician meant more than quoting Galen or balancing humors. It meant proof, and the barber-surgeon, well, he began to fade. The divorce between barber and surgeon wasn't swift, it was the kind of long, drawn-out separation that plays out slowly across generations. One day, you're pulling teeth and lancing boils. A few years later, someone says you can only cut hair unless you're licensed by a royal college. And then, before you know it, you're out of the medical business entirely, your razors relegated to beards and brows, not bones. The 18th and 19th centuries formalized the split. In Britain, the 1745 separation of the barber-surgeons company into two distinct entities marked the moment the relationship officially ended. The surgeons went on to become full-fledged medical professionals, founding colleges and journals. The barbers, they stayed on high street corners, spinning red and white poles and sharpening razors. Historians still argue whether the barbers were pushed out or walked away. Some say the rise of formal surgical training made the old ways obsolete. Others claim the barbers themselves were content to shed the blood-stained apron in favor of a cleaner, more fashionable rule. But the truth is likely more human. The world changed. People demanded more than poultices and prayers. And the institutions, the universities, the hospitals grew too big for the small shop with the rattling shutters and the shelf of leech jars. That doesn't mean the barber disappeared. Far from it. Instead, he evolved. Barbers leaned harder into grooming. They innovated with oils, perfumes, new blades. The shops remained community centers, even if they no longer smelled of boiled cloth and vinegar-soaked wound dressings. They became places for conversation, politics, poetry, revolution, and rest. In the Ottoman Empire, for instance, Barbers were essential community figures. A shave, a smoke, a chat. In parts of Africa and the Caribbean, the barbershop became a place of resistance where colonial rule was challenged and songs were born. In 20th century America, the barbershop was where jazz flowed, deals were made, and civil rights were quietly organized under the cover of hair clippings. And yet, something of the old barber-surgeon always lingered. You see it in the way your barber lifts a straight razor, not casually, but reverently. You hear it in the way he talks about tendons and skin, not as a stylist, but as someone who remembers how bodies fall apart and how, sometimes, they can be held together. He opens a drawer and pulls out a worn book, leather-bound, soft at the corners. Inside are pages of notes, treatments for headaches, ointments for burns, diagrams of hands and feet. Not a medical textbook. Asterisk journal, asterisk. A scrapbook of sorts. Things he's learned. Tricks from old mentors. Words scribbled next to illustrations that look nothing like the anatomically correct ones we know today, but feel right. He hands it to you for a moment. You flip through. There's a pressed sprig of rosemary, a list of herbs good for fevers in winter, a sketch of a neck muscle with "do not cut here," underlined 3 times. You smile. He shrugs. Old habits. He's not embarrassed. There's pride in those pages, pride not just in knowledge, but in asterisk continuity asterisk. In the idea that even if barbers are no longer allowed to stitch wounds or extract teeth, they asterisk remember asterisk how. They carry it forward, like folklore, like an heirloom. And even now, in some corners of the world, barber-surgeons still exist, not legally, perhaps, but functionally. In places where access to health care is limited, the man with the scissors may still be the one you call when the pain is unbearable. Because he knows. Because he's done it before. Because someone asterisk has asterisk too. You hand back the book gently. He places it on a shelf behind a small curtain. Not hidden, just tucked away. Like a memory that still needs to breathe. The room is dim now, and the shop is close to the outside. But you don't leave. Neither does he. There's something sacred about the moment, not because of what was lost, but because of what endured. He smiles and says, "Funny, isn't it, that they still use the pole? All those years later, they don't even know why anymore. But it's there, and you realize he's right. The red and white spiral outside isn't just a brand. It's a quiet memorial, a soft, spinning echo of blood and bandages and the man who wielded both. There's something different in the room now. Not just the light, it's nearly gone, except for the low amber flicker of the lantern, but something in the air. Thicker with memory, quieter, deeper, as if even the dust is listening. The barber's movements are slow now. He picks up a broom, begins to sweep. Not out of necessity, there's barely anything on the floor, but because that's what you do when the day winds down. You tidy, you finish, you watch him move. The same hands that held blades now guiding straw bristles over old planks. And you wonder how many barber-surgeons swept up blood and hair at the end of days filled with suffering and relief. Because for all the slicing and sewing, the curing and cleaning, there was always this part, the aftermath, the reset, the silence after the scream. Tonight, he shares one last story. Not about politics or plagues, not about leeches or legislation, but about a boy, a young apprentice. His name was Thomas, he says, voice soft now. Barely 12 when he came to me. Couldn't read, scared of his own shadow, but he could listen. He had hands like a bird, quick, careful, light. He pauses, leans the broom against the wall. His eyes are far away now, somewhere in another season. I taught him how to hold the blade, how to feel the skin, not just cut it. How to read a man's color before he speaks. He stayed with me 5 years. Then one day, he was gone. No note, no word, just the razors polished, wrapped and left on the table. He doesn't say it with sadness, just acceptance, as if this is how apprentices sometimes go like shadows at dusk. Here, then not. Historians still argue how much of the barber-surgeon's legacy survived in formal medicine. They trace instruments, surgical techniques, field treatments. But there's a quieter legacy, harder to cite, but easier to feel. It's in the asterisk way asterisk things are done. The calm voice during pain, the steady hand during fear, the ordinary tools used for extraordinary moments. Your barber, now sweeping behind the chair, carries that legacy. Not in titles or degrees, but in gestures. The way he folds cloth, the way he checks the edge of his razor with his thumb, the way he never rushes, no matter the hour. That's the part you can't legislate, can't license, can't regulate into a syllabus. And that's why, even after the formal split, after barbers were told they could no longer cut into flesh or drain a wound, some kept doing it anyway. Quietly, out of sight, because people still asked. And because someone had to say yes. In rural places, especially, barber surgeons kept serving. Not in hospitals or universities, but in kitchens, in barns, under trees. With old tools wrapped in cloth, with fingers that knew what worked. Even today, in parts of the world where doctors are scarce, a man with a blade and a memory becomes a healer again. He doesn't wear a white coat. He doesn't ask you to fill out forms. He just opens his bag, warms his hands, and asks where it hurts. You're a barber pours to cups of something dark and sweet-smelling. Not wine. Exactly, something older, something herbal. He hands one to you and raises his own. To those who never called themselves doctors, he says, but kept people alive just the same. You raise your cup in return. Outside, you can almost hear the past spinning with the barber's pole. That soft whirl of stories and lives and steady hands. You remember that the pole itself, it's red, white, and sometimes blue stripes still stands on modern barbershops. A few even light up, electric and smooth. But the meaning, faded, lost to time. Most who pass it think of it as a brand, a symbol of tradition, maybe a quaint touch. But now you know, it was once a sign of surgery, of medicine, of blood and healing and trust. The last of the liquid warms your chest. You feel drowsy, not from exhaustion but from being full. Full of story, full of presence. And somewhere, not so far from this moment, a barber wraps his tools and blows out a lantern. And another picks up his blade and kneels beside a soldier in a field. And another lays out leeches in a dish and hums to himself as the city shutters its doors against plague. One more cut, one more stitch, one more moment of calm hands in a panicked world. You place your cup down. The barber nods. There's nothing more to say. The last of the warmth in your cup lingers in your hands as the barber moves through the final steps of closing shop. It's not a loud affair, there's no clatter. No shout, no rattle of keys, just soft, familiar gestures, the turning down of lantern wicks, the folding of cloths, the setting aside of blades. There's something almost sacred about it, like a ritual known only to those who've lived it enough times to no longer need to think. You take one last look around the room. Everything here feels earned. The stained apron hanging by the hearth. The drawer of herbs with names half erased by use, the ledger of patients, creased and crowded with ink, the bone-handled razor that gleams even in the half-dark. It's not museum material, but it's more precious than that. This is a place where people were touched, tended, and sometimes saved. And now it's time for you to go. But before you do, your barber pulls something from under the counter. A little wooden box, simple, smoothed by time, and tied shut with a length of faded twine. He places it in your hands. It's empty, he says with a wink. That way, you can carry whatever you need in it. You don't ask what it means. Not exactly, but maybe it's not meant to be understood in words. Maybe it's just one of those parting gifts that makes sense only after a long walk home. Barbers didn't give prescriptions. They gave things like this: a cloth to bite, a strong hand to hold, a jar of herbs to brew when sleep won't come, and sometimes something empty, a gesture of trust, a container for your own story. He walks you to the door. The pole outside sways gently, catching moonlight on its faded stripes. Once upon a time, that pole meant bloodletting, surgery, a place to bring your pain. Now it means something else: memory, craft, and a kind of care that never really left, even when the razors dulled and the rules changed. Historians still argue whether barber-surgeons should be remembered as brave medics or dangerous butchers, as heroes or hacks, as real doctors or something almost real. But tonight, as you look at the man behind you, his hands folded, his eyes soft, his face lit by the last flame, you know the truth doesn't care much for titles. He was there, he listened, he learned to hold what hurt in one hand and a blade in the other. And if that's not medicine, what is? You nod your goodbye, stepping out into the cool night. The wind catches your collar. Somewhere, far off, a dog barks once and then falls silent. You don't look back, but you know he's still there, tending the flame, keeping the space, waiting for the next person who walks in needing something they can't quite name. Just a cut, they'll say. But you and he will know better. Asterisk asterisk wind down approx. 300 words asterisk asterisk now. As the story fades and the world quiets, let your breath slow with it. Let the image of that warm, flickering barbershop stay in your mind a moment longer. The feel of worn wood beneath your fingers, the rustle of cloth, the soft hum of steel on strop. Let the sounds of the room melt into silence. The distant clang of a water basin, the low murmur of a barber's story told for the 100th time, gentle as a lullaby. There is nothing left to fix tonight, nothing left to lance or pull or stitch. You've made it through the bloodletting and the gossip, the guild squabbles and the jars of leeches. Now, the razors are folded. The pole outside spins slow and silent in the breeze, and the door to the shop is gently closed behind you. You are outside now, in the soft dark of a world that has quieted with you. Your limbs are heavy, your mind soft round the edges, your breath steady. Whatever you brought into the barbershop, pain, worry, weariness, it stayed there. It's done. Tonight you rest. So close your eyes. Feel the weight of sleep gather gently at the back of your head. Let it drift forward like a cloth being folded over your thoughts. You are safe. You are still. You are already on your way.